But we can't back down from doing that just because we're not Josh McDowell or John MacArthur. We can't just outsource these things. Okay. Good. Any questions on that? Refutation of heresy?
Well, and I'm just thinking about, too, you know, we talked about this a little bit in the ladies' Bible study. You and I have had conversations about this very principle, that it's a conversational thing of bring up a point. Well, let me show you here. I don't think you're quite on the right track with that. It's a loving, conversational. It doesn't have to be a beat down.
Right. That's right.
You know, I mean,
smack down.
And hopefully the person hearing it is wanting to be corrected in the things they're in error of.
Yeah, that's
Why
right.
are we coming to church if we're not wanting to be corrected?
That's right. That's right. I mean, you know, we're all coming here so that we can be better servants of Christ, so that we can be less in error, so that we can be more faithful to reflecting His attributes. So, you know, it has to be a kind and compassionate conversation. At some point, it might need to be, you might need to cut the conversation off and say, yeah, this isn't going anywhere. Mm-hmm. You need to go your way, I'm going to go my way. You know, if we can't discuss this civilly or in a way that's actually moving the conversation forward. In fact, let's flip over to Titus 1:13 real quickly, because this is kind of a good one to close that refutation error. Titus 1:13. And remember, what is the goal? And I just think evangelism is teaching people what is right, proclaiming the truth, and letting them either be pulled by the Spirit in or not. Because it's not going to happen with our slick whatever. But heresy is a deeper level, but the goal is the same, to pull them into the Christian community so that they will be faithful followers of Christ. And Titus 1:13, this testimony is true, for this reason reprove them severely, so that they may be sound in the faith. Now, remember back in Titus 1, the previous verse, I thought it was earlier, but the previous verse, verse 12, one of themselves, a prophet of their own, said, Cretans are always lazy, are always liars, evil beasts, lazy gluttons. So, you know, he's not pulling a lot of punches here. But he says, you know, you need to pull them out of that. And that is the goal, to bring them into the community so that they may be sound in their faith. That presupposes that they're believers. If not, we do evangelism. If they are believers, we need to refute their error. If they do not respond properly to that rebuke, well, then I have every right to question the validity of whatever profession of faith they made as a kid or in college or whatever. And Scripture says you treat them like an outsider, which doesn't mean you alienate them or something like that, but it means that you don't have to continue to believe that that person is a Christian if they refuse to be part of the Christian community. The goal is to bring them back so that they can be sound in faith. Good. Anything else? Any other questions about that? You know, we refute heresy on a macro level. All the crazy, weird ideas that are going on out there in the big wide world, but we also do it on a micro, on an interpersonal level. And we shouldn't back down from doing that. We'll be more successful if our tone is winsome, if we do it winsomely, and if we're doing it truthfully. Not just this is my opinion about that, but this is what God's Word fairly clearly teaches about that. You either accept that or not. Social implications of the gospel. What is the social implications of the gospel? What does that phrase sound like? It sounds like the social gospel. We're not talking the social gospel here. Social gospel is a movement in the late 1800s, early 1900s, which basically was trying to get the church to focus more on social, material needs, the needs of the poor, the needs of the beleaguered, of the downtrodden. But in doing so, it forgot the whole gospel part. And it just became basically a welfare kind of a movement. And that's what I want to avoid. And that's why I know some people get a little nervous when you talk about the social implications of the gospel. what is amazing is how often the gospel is connected, or faith in God is connected with the need to help the beleaguered and the downtrodden and the disadvantaged segments of society. The first point underneath the social implications of the gospel, some of the most straightforward statements in the Bible about spirituality are related to social activity. We've gone through these. I'll just mention them again quickly. Micah 6:8. What does the Lord require of you? But to do justly, to love mercy, to walk humbly before your God. He's just said in the previous verses, in verses 6 and 7, he says, do I want zillions and zillions of sacrifices? Is that really what I want? I don't want those things if you can't even act justly and live humbly with one another. You know, what good are those sacrifices to the Lord if you're a complete, arrogant, whatever? And he says to people, you know, Amos and Micah and some of these guys, they say, you know, what is the point of spirituality if it is not practiced properly on the human level? You can't divorce, you can't separate how I treat people from my relationship to God. Amos is all over this principle. He says, you know, you come to me and your feasts and your stuff, and I said, he says, or Isaiah chapter 1, he says, I'm tired of it because you're treating each other so poorly. That is an unacceptable disjunction of relationship to God and relationship to man, of the horizontal, vertical, and the horizontal relationships. I need my V8 or something like that. People on the video, if it's not turned off, they're going to think I'm blessed. I've gone Catholic. So, you know, the relationship with God cannot be done in isolation from our relationships with one another. Every time we say, oh man, it's God and me. No, it's not God and you. It's God and you in the community. In fact, at the top, that's one of the things that motivated what I put at the top of the previous page that you may or may not have. The Christian religion equals personal relationships with God and with others, and essential doctrine and essential practice. Interesting how Jesus says, I think we looked at this on Sunday, where 2 or 3 are gathered, I am there in their midst. So God's relationship with Christ's relationship with the community is based on the community's relationship with itself, to a certain extent. Where there are 2 or 3 there, then Christ is participating. There has to be a social, a horizontal dimension as a prerequisite to the vertical dimension. Jeremiah 22:16, we talked about this one as well. Jeremiah speaks of spirituality in terms of knowing God, and with the Judean king, he speaks of the Judean king Josiah, and he says, he defended the cause of the poor and the needy. Is that not what it means to know him? Now that's a really powerful statement, giving us a glimpse into what is right relationship with God. Jeremiah is inspired by God to put that in terms of concern for the poor and the needy. And of course, we've mentioned James 1:27 several times, to consider the widow and the orphan and to keep oneself unstained by the world. This is what true religion looks like. So I give you some verses there, concern for the beleaguered members of the church and the society, and do keep in mind that Paul's admonition in Galatians 6:10 that there needs to be attention to those in the community. If you recall, the very birth of the office of deacon in Acts chapter 6 was out of the fact that there were material needs among the community. There were people, you know, the early church was gathering together and things were going well, and then they started realizing that that the needs of some people were not being met, the widows and some other people, and they're coming to the apostles and saying, we can't do this. We can't both teach and both meet the material needs of the community, but both of these things need to happen. Both the spiritual needs must be met and the material needs of the community. Therefore, they created a whole new office to meet those needs. And we call those deacons, based on the word as used in Acts chapter 6. That there needs to be a balance there, but then there's a dimension where it can go outside, quote unquote, the church as well. What are some practical applications? We got about 2 more minutes. What are some practical applications of this for our church? How do we meet? How can we meet the social, material needs of those around us? Open-ended question. I just want to get you thinking about this.
Well, some people are already doing it. They go and they pick up Yvonne and bring her to church.
There you go. That's a great one. That's a very good one.
And they bring her to the ladies' Bible study.
Okay, good.
That's a definite need.
Good. What else?
When there's been illness, bring food and
Absolutely.
Taking care of people and helping out.
And you know what? We might not think about how that is an implication of the fact that we're believers. That's what we do. We meet those material needs as they come up. Good. What else? What else happens?
Some people do, and this is private, but they do for people in need that may be within our church or outside our church.
Yeah.
Who are believers, and we know that they have needs, and I think that's probably something that everybody does privately.
Okay.
You're talking about financial help?
Yeah.
Okay. Good. So this, I mean, this happens, and we know it should happen. I don't always think that we connect it with the gospel, with the fact that this is one of the demands on us, and a privilege to be able to meet the material needs of those around us because of the grace that God has extended to us, and also to keep in mind that God has given us blessings so that we can be blessings to those around us.
It requires us to be sensitive
That's
to
true.
people around us and to talk to them,
And
get to know them.
talk to them too.
Yeah.
And maybe that's part of the problem, because we don't think often of this as a legitimate expression of what we should be doing as a church or as individuals. We are not sensitive to the needs of those around us. So, I really would encourage you to go through these verses and to see how significant part of our Christian experience this should be. And how we're often not looking for opportunities to minister materially. Also remember, just as Christ did this, he ministered materially, but that was a means to an end. Unlike the social gospel, it wasn't an end in and of itself, where, okay, now we got all the social needs met and we're moving on. It was a need, it was a means for Christ as he, the 5 loaves and the fish and all these things. It is a means to be able to meet the spiritual needs of his followers, of the community. Conclusion, we talked about this a few weeks ago. Cling to the essentials. We need to be careful of discussions about non-essentials in evangelism. We've spoken several times of our ability to cooperate with others who adhere to the essentials, but also we need to be careful of those who do not. I mean, I simply don't have anything in common with someone who does not ascribe to the Trinity. I mean, it's really that simple. We can talk, we can have a civil discussion, but in terms of where I am and where that person is, there's not commonality there for a common cause. And St. Augustine's, his expression, in essentials, unity, and non-essentials, diversity, in all things, humility. And that's all. Any questions or thoughts before we close? And we will get into, I'm not sure what we're going to do next week, but I do know that, is this pretty much confirmed for 2 weeks from tonight?
Well, that's what I was told.
Okay. I think 2 weeks from tonight we're going caroling.
Yes.
So that would be really fun.
Yes.
And we'll get you some more details about that as we get closer. But put that on your calendar. We might try to meet a little earlier to do that. I'm not really sure, but we'll figure that out. We'll get you some information about that. Let me close with a word of prayer. Lord, thank you for your word, for these verses we've been able to go through very quickly, but but they are certainly meaningful and profound verses for us. And